Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Tales from the Fandom. Today, I am joined by a podcaster from the Magpies Actual Play Podcast. I am joined by Minna, and I am so excited to have her here after first listening to the Magpies Podcast almost 2 years ago, which if you're not listening, you need to go check it out right now. I will not be ashamed to say, hit the stop button, go look it up, go ahead and download it, come back to this episode. There you go. Minna, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come talk to me today.
Of course. It's very fun to be here.
I am super excited. I think the Magpies Podcast is one of the probably the most innovative actual play podcasts that I have listened to. I love what your group of people do on it. I'm excited to get to share that podcast with the people who get to listen to this podcast later on. I've been following you for a number of years now, and I think you're following me. I'm pretty sure.
Yes, I'm following you.
If not, that's totally okay. Following is not a requirement here on this podcast.
No, you know I'm following you because I followed you to that Sim stream the other week.
That's right.
That Jackbox stream the other week.
Yes, Jackbox. So fun. I love killing it at Jackbox games. But one of the fandoms that you and I share in common is Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
How did you first get into the Star Wars fandom?
So getting into Star Wars versus getting into the Star Wars fandom is a difference of about 20 years.
All right. So how did you get into Star Wars?
Star Wars, The Phantom Menace, came out in 1999 when I was 7, and I was very into it. I think that was the first VHS I owned, actually. Didn't watch the original trilogy till high school, which I think I finally watched it because I joined a club called the Death Star Club, and I felt like a fake member of that club without having seen them. As for fandom, I don't think I got into it like in a fanish way until Star Wars Campaign got me into it, the Campaign podcast.
Okay.
And that was kind of like a blueprint for like how you could be a fan the way I'm a fan in Star Wars, because it's like a very intimidating to look at from the outside, because kind of the cultural perception of a Star Wars fan is not the way that I do fandom.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why I didn't come to it through like fan fiction the way I normally would anyway. But anyway, that's how I got into Star Wars fandom. Like, how long ago? Probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point.
Okay, cool. You are one of a number of guests that I've had recently where your first exposure was the Phantom Menace, which I find Star Wars to be one of the most diverse fandoms or diverse things that people can get into as far as entry points, because there's so many of them. There's the original trilogy, there's the prequel trilogy, there's the sequel trilogy, there's the cartoons. It's very much something where everyone has a different story to tell.
Yeah, it's one of those things, a little bit like Doctor Who, like your entry point kind of a little bit informs like how you, like what you want out of Star Wars, or at least like how you look at Star Wars, because I know a lot of people who came to it from original trilogy first like have very different viewpoints on the prequel trilogy to me, just because I don't know a Star Wars without that trilogy.
Exactly. And that's one of the cool things is not only that, but I feel like with the passage of time since the prequel trilogy came out, which is 21 years ago now, I believe, at this point, because it came out in 99, so
yep, 21.
I think math is good, and I did it. Yes, good job, me. I feel that the viewpoints of the prequel trilogy have definitely softened or changed from when they first came out.
Well, you're probably seeing a lot more people on the internet who don't remember a time before those.
That too. I didn't think of it that way. I just thought maybe people are being nicer now, and
I mean,
like
they may also be nicer. I don't know. I don't know the difference.
Now, you got into it when you were 7 with Phantom Menace. Do you have a favorite character in the Star Wars universe?
I have to answer Padme Amidala. That's, at this point, almost my brand, at least on Twitter.
I love Padme. I I love her in the movies halfway because I love Natalie Portman, and I enjoyed the character and wanted to see her do more.
Mhm.
And like that itch was scratched through like the Clone Wars cartoon series, and then with the books. I know I've read only the first book, which E.K. Johnston wrote. I think is a year or two ago, and then the new one just came out. I think last week
It came
as
out,
we were
yeah, 5
recording
days
this.
ago.
Yeah, as we're recording this in June. But yes, I love Padme. I find her a character that is very fascinating, that not enough was done with. Her story seemed real incomplete, and I'm really happy that they're slowly like adding to this character.
Yeah, and, like, the characters around her. There's just so much, I guess, with her that doesn't get explored on the screen as well, but I really enjoy her a lot.
What is it about Padme that draws you to her?
I'm trying to quantify it. I mean, part of it is that she was the character who drew me into Star Wars, if that makes sense. Because, like, they had a lot of, when I was 7, they had a lot of marketing towards people in my target audience that
Mm-hmm.
was Padme Amidala centric, well, Queen Amidala centric. So there's a little bit of like the, oh yes, this is who I latched onto, but also I like that she's so competent. I like that she's really an idealist, and like she's misguided a lot in that she thinks she can reform the Republic as it is, and that doesn't end up being the case. But I think there's something to be said for like really trying your best. And she just has such a strong idea of like justice.
I totally see that, especially through the first book that E.K. Johnston wrote, which I believe it's Queen's Shadow.
Queen's Shadow.
There we go. See, you're on top of it.
Yes.
And I'm just grasping. I'm grasping for straws because I read it like months ago, and I was hoping that was what it was. But definitely in like that book, it made it very clear as you're reading through it of just how almost insignificant one person is in this like galactic senate. And when you think about it and you see those scenes in the movies, like sure she's being focused on because of the issue with Naboo and the blockade and going forward like from there, but at the same time like you're just, there's so many other things that are happening and moving in like that
Mhm.
galactic politics. And I don't know, like it's like a grain of sand on a beach.
Yeah, and that's definitely the case even with, I mean, Naboo is, the issue of the Naboo invasion is kind of like a small one to the Senate itself, but it's
Hmm.
huge for Padme because that's her world. And yeah, it's interesting to see her kind of like in Queen's Shadow, there's like these moments where she looks at another planet that's experiencing some issue that the Senate's overlooking, and she's like, "Well, I understand this feeling, and it's not right that we're ignoring this. We need to find a way to make this right."
Exactly. And it's definitely something where I think the movies, I don't want, because the movies aren't about Padme. Like she's there, and of course she's like Luke and Leia's mom, but at the same time, it was more Anakin and Obi-Wan centric.
Mhm.
So you didn't get as much time with her as maybe you should have.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's in the movies because she's Luke and Leia's mom, and she's going to die, and that ends up taking away from her character a lot of the time because they ended up almost accidentally making this really strong character, and then every time she gets put into a scene with Anakin where it's supposed to be about romance, all of her characterization goes out the window, and she just kind of dies for no reason.
Yeah.
It's yeah. It's unfortunate that she also had to be that character in the narrative.
Yeah. I agree 100% on that. I just hope that they continue like fleshing out whether they did with Queen Shadow, or like maybe we'll get something else during like Clone Warsy time, or somewhere. It'd be nice to just get a little bit more of her. I'd really dig it. I know politics does not make like the best thing to watch on TV or in a movie, but I could read a Star Wars political book all day.
Yeah, and the thing I really love about E.K. Johnston's Padme books is that A, she gets to dig into the like Star Wars politics a little bit, but B, I just really love that it fleshes out Padme's relationships that aren't with Anakin. And
Yes.
especially just she has all of these great relationships with other extremely competent women around her who are like barely in the movies, but I am deeply into all of those friendships. So it's been really, really fun to see them get fleshed out.
I think my favorite, because I've only read Queen Shadow at this point, is her relationship with or her the start of her relationship with Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, and just seeing those three like play the game to begin with, and
Yeah.
then kind of like form this like new friendship. That was one of the highlights of the book.
That was really fun. The thing that I was really, really glad that got fleshed out was the relationship with Sabe,
Yes.
which I was already intrigued by and like sort of a little bit shipped, but like the dynamic with them in these books is so good. I can't deal with it. It's just this like really, I very much enjoy relationships that are built on like this really strong loyalty. That's kind of fun for me in fiction. We'll come back to that with Clockwork Wars, I'm sure. But I just find that really compelling, and I'm glad that we get to see more of them because I don't know. It like almost turns into like one of the most important relationships in her life in those books in a way that we don't get to see at all in the movies.
Right.
Or I think probably in the TV shows, because I doubt Sabe shows up in Clone Wars.
No, I don't believe she does. I don't believe any of the handmaids are in Clone Wars.
Apparently, Sabe's in Vader, but from what I've read, I'm not especially interested in seeing what happens there.
Yeah, Vader the comic.
The
series?
comics.
Okay, I have not read those. I think I've read the first 6, and then comics are expensive sometimes.
It's a recent development, like to
Okay,
the point that we don't know how it ends yet. I just am
Gotcha.
following it via other people who are willing to read the comic for Sabe.
So you've got Padme as your favorite. Do you have a favorite movie? Is it like one of the prequels, or is it one of like something else?
It's a hard question. Because like is it my favorite as in I think it's a good movie, or is it my favorite as it's the one I like the most, you know?
The one you like the most.
Phantom Menace. Who are we kidding? It's got Padme and the Handmaidens and that whole plot. It also has pod racing, which is amazing. I love that whole sequence. Don't take a second of it away from me.
I will not take a second of away from you. It's something where I watched it when I was 2 years out of high school. So I don't know, I was 19 at the time. I went to see Phantom Menace in the theaters, I think 7 or 8 times. And each time I would drag somebody with me that hadn't seen the movie and be like, you got to watch this movie with me. It's so cool. Because of pod racing at the time, when I like in the theater, that was one of the coolest things to watch. And then of course the lightsaber duel at the end, which, at the time you've only seen the original trilogy, and they don't have anything near like what they're bringing to this fight.
Yeah, the saber fights in the prequels are so kinetic and fun to watch.
They are. It's definitely something. And yeah, I've watched it. I watched it recently with the kids. I think maybe last year, and they got into it. So I was pleased with them being like, okay, they're watching it, they're enjoying it. I'm cool. I have to ask, because the Star Wars community is definitely like not one of the greatest ones on the internet at the time. the Skywalker legacy is over as far as the episodes like 1 through 9, essentially. We had the Solo movie, we had Rogue One, we've got Clone Wars done and complete and Rebels is done. What are you looking forward to if they do with whatever they do next? Like, what's on your horizon of Star Wars? Like, what do you want to see from the franchise?
Like stuff that they've got planned or stuff that I would like to see?
Stuff that you would like to see.
Oh boy. Where do I start? Because there's so much that I'm interested in seeing, but a lot of what I'm most interested in seeing, like, I'm also going to fanfic for that a lot lately. I would have told you if it had been a couple of years ago, give me a Padme novel, but they have given, and I'm so happy about that. It'd be neat to see Sabe and the Rebellion. I don't know that they would ever do that, except maybe in like a comic or something. I don't know. But that would be neat to see, because it's definitely alluded to in the Queen's Peril books, and I'm into that. Or Queen's Shadow books.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to... We've got so much possibility out there right now. I think what I really want to see is more things like The Mandalorian that aren't even a little bit about the characters that we know about now.
Yes.
Like, that's what I want to see. There's so much possibility in this universe, and there's a lot of things that keep going back to the same characters. And I'm like, give me someone new.
100% agree. Like, when they announced The Mandalorian, I was like, oh gosh, I don't like... I am not a person that is like all about Boba Fett, and I was like, no, just
Same.
I don't want Boba Fett.
But I am deeply, deeply into this. Like, it's okay. Even Sabine Wren did not get me caring about Mandalorian bullshit, but The Mandalorian did.
I know.
I completely glossed over the Rebels episodes with Mandos in them a little bit when I was watching, and then I had to go back and rewatch them after Mandalorian. Like, need to understand these people.
See, and I haven't watched Rebels, but I watched Clone Wars, which has a lot of Mandalorian stuff in it, and I'm just I did not care. Like, it's not something that was like, oh, I care about this. No, I didn't care. And I got Disney Plus the second day because I didn't want to be left out of any conversation. What they did with The Mandalorian in the Star Wars universe is what I want them to do with everything else. Make it as far away as possible from what we've seen.
And it also like gives like a interesting new perspective on like events that we already know about. Like, this is post Empire, or I guess post Return of the Jedi by like 4 years. It's 9 ABY. 5 years? 5 years. Anyway, I don't know why I'm doing timelines. But the thing it does with the Mandalorian Enclave is that it kind of lets you see the results of what the Empire did. Like, we never get to look at the results of the genocides that they perpetrate until Mandalorian. Like, it hardly even in like Leia focused stuff, the Alderaanian thing hardly even gets touched on.
That was one of the best things that they did. Was they make enough references to the movies or to whatever, comics, cartoons. They have enough like those little built-in references, but following the character, having that music, the way it was set, the like 20 to 30 minute episodes where it's like, okay, you know what? You don't need to go on for an hour. You don't need to add stuff. Like, you're really just getting down to like this nitty gritty. You're giving me characters, like, even if they show up in one episode, where I'm like, I really want to know more about her, like in the little village.
Yeah,
where
Omera was great.
Yeah, that character was like, I've got a blaster and I know how to use it.
Yeah, no, there were some great characters in that. It's really refreshing.
It is. I need more of that. Give me like a Star Wars heist movie.
Oh my
where
god,
they're
give me a Star Wars heist movie.
Like, where they're just trying to rip like somebody off, and don't make it a hut. Like, figure out another person to like rip off that is rich, or
I was deeply into the Solo movie because of that. Like a train robbery. We got that. We got just a lot of fun stuff in that one. That's a good one.
yes it is.
Like I was like going into it, I was very skeptical because I was like, we don't need to know about Han's backstory.
Right? The only person that I cared about in at least to begin with was I want more Lando, because Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was interested in that going in, and then Kira predictably stole my heart because especially at the time it came out, that was a character type I was real into. Just somebody who's like doing whatever they have to survive, who has kind of closed off from the world a little bit. Very into that.
And so I just have to ask, because you mentioned it a few times, do you read Star Wars fan fiction?
Yes, I also write it.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah, no, I actually just finished up in May an event called Star Wars Big Bang, which is a bunch of people writing long Star Wars fics in the same time frame. That was a lot of fun. God, I just jump around so much with Era. I don't even know where to start talking about that kind of thing.
Where do you primarily like post? Do you post it, or is it just for your okay?
Archive of Our Own is kind of the big place that people post stuff at this point, or at least for me. I know fanfiction.net and Wattpad are still around, but I'm definitely an AO3 person.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
I haven't read fan fiction in ages, probably since college, and that was like it wasn't Star Wars fan fiction, it was another fandom that I was really into, and then I read it so much that when the next book came out, I was like, this isn't anything like what I've read.
Yeah, I struggle a lot with like unfinished media and like fan fiction for that, like, or even like if I theorize too much and then I get the next installment, I can be disappointed. So I try not to do that too much. Star Wars is great in that you can, again, much like I was saying with future Star Wars media, there's so many corners that you can dig into and just do whatever you want in. And so that can be fun. I love an AU, an alternate universe fic. Those are great. Time travel, love it. I've fallen down a serious time travel hole. Yeah, there's some good stuff out there. Have been getting into podficking lately too, which is fun. Which is when you record a fic, like an audiobook, but for fanfiction.
Okay. I did not know that was a thing.
It's a thing, and there's a really, it turns out, welcoming community out there. After I finished the Star Wars Big Bang event, I fell headlong into a podfic event. We're gonna get out of events at some point.
You'll have to tell me more after we wrap up this episode, so I can learn more about it. On top of the Star Wars fandom, I always like when I send out this little survey to everyone that wants to record. Oh, what's something that people would recommend? What would you recommend? And you had recommended a book series called The Clocktar Wars.
Yes, by T. Kingfisher.
I have never heard of it. So what is it, and why would you recommend it?
It's a duology of books they're kind of a fantasy adventure / romance series. It's hard to describe genres for me. They're so where do I start? So it starts with Slate, who has been described as a guerrilla accountant, putting together a team for basically a suicide mission. She's got on her side a thief named Brenner, not a thief, I think he's an assassin named Brenner. And she finds in jail a former paladin who got possessed, and then the demon got killed, but he is still in disgrace, named Caliban. And the three of them, plus a very sheltered, fairly misogynistic monk, go on a quest to try and find these horrible, horrible creatures that have been attacking their kingdom, and try and stop them if possible. There are really fun romance tropes. just the characters are really good. They eventually meet a character named Grimehug, who's a gnoll, which is a small non-human creature, and we get to learn about their culture a little bit. That's fun. They're just really, I don't know what it is about T. Kingfisher, but it's very much like comfort food fantasy for me, even though a lot of bad things happen in them.
I like that you wrote in your notes that there is huddling for warmth in the rain at some point.
Here's the thing. When Ree got me into these books, that is one of the lures she gave me. I think huddling for rain. At some point, there's only one bed trope or something. I think that's how she got me into them.
Now, is this I'm going to assume not a YA novel. This is like a full
This is an adult novel, yeah.
adult. Yeah, okay.
I do read a lot of YA fantasy, but these are adult. T. Kingfisher, I think, is actually the pen name that this author uses for adult fiction.
Okay. It definitely sounds interesting, especially that whole let's just get whoever we can get to see if they even succeed on a mission.
Yeah, they're
always
the
like
third
that.
party sent on this mission. The others have not come back.
I like where they're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and you just get these characters that are just, you don't know how they would work, but they do. And you don't know how they work as a team, yet I'm sure they'll find a way.
Yeah, and by the end of it, they're all friends, and yeah, it's great. I love that kind of thing. Also, gotta love an angsty paladin, and Kingfisher has so many of those in her books.
And it's just 2 books, is that correct? Because
the Clockwork Wars is 2 books, yeah.
Okay. And separate from anything else, or is it involved in a bigger fantasy series, or is it just that's it, self-contained?
It's not necessarily involved in a bigger fantasy series, but she's written other books set in this world. So Swordheart is also set in this world sometime after Clockwork Wars, and then after that sometime is Paladin's Grace. But they just share a world. They don't rely on each other for information necessarily.
Oh, okay. Well, that's pretty neat that they exist in that same world, but they're not beholden to what came before.
Yeah, and occasionally characters from other books will get referenced in future books, but not in a way that you need to know the other books to get it.
That's really refreshing that I don't have to read 15 books to figure out what's going on in this book.
The author really likes to describe her books as fluffy romances, and then other people are no, not fluffy romances. But I do understand where she's coming from.
That is an interesting description, fluffy romances. I'll have to remember that.
Horrifying things will happen, but at heart, there is a very nice romance.
Oh my goodness. So not only do you do Star Wars, you love Star Wars, and you recommending the Clock Tower Wars, which I'm going to have to put on my Amazon wish list just to remember it, so that way I can be oh yeah, let's get this book and read it. You're into tabletop role-playing games.
I am.
How did that happen?
I think this is also down to Star Wars campaign. So I joined the One Shot Network Discord because I got deeply into Star Wars campaign. And I think I started listening to that podcast partly because I wanted to play role-playing games but didn't know where to start. And I was like, this seems like a cool one, and just a lot of factors came together and it was exactly what I needed. But I joined the One Shot Network Discord, and they were a very welcoming place that always had games going on, so I started playing some short games from there. And pretty much all of my long-running role-playing games have sprung either from there or from people that I originally met there, who are now just friends.
When you joined these games, were they play-by-post games, or just jumping onto a Discord server, or Roll20, the online components?
Yeah, jumping in a voice chat. I did technically my first D&D game was before I did one-shot stuff. I just found someone random on the internet who was like, I want to run a game for some newbies, and I was like, I'm a newbie. But pretty shortly after that, I got drawn into in Discord voice chat has been most of my games. I have rarely played an in-person session.
Okay. Which game systems or settings do you like?
Really like Blades in the Dark, obviously. The Star Wars FFG system is fun. Masks is a big one. Just PBTA in general has been good to me. I guess I'm playing D&D, but it's not my favorite.
It's definitely, as far as like online presence with Twitter, and because you're on Twitter, I'm on Twitter, and I'm sure we follow a lot of the like similar people. I've definitely seen a shift of D&D, great entry point at times for people, but then finding that game system that's not D&D that really works the best for like the person and their play style, and them finding it is one of the like those rewarding things of, oh my gosh, like I discovered this Powered by the Apocalypse game and I love how it runs and I love how to make characters, and like that's what people are looking for. Is one of those things that like I got into role playing through Dungeons and Dragons, but I know that my favorite games are not Dungeons and Dragons. It's just hard to find people to play other things at times.
Yeah, I mean, originally that was why I played that first Dungeons and Dragons game, and it was a lot of fun, but we did not actually play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that was perfect for me at the time. I think we had one combat the entire several month long adventure, and it was a very short combat. And that was great for me. I'm also currently playing D&D because I'm playing with a very good friend group, and I really enjoy doing characters with them, and I enjoy what we built. Probably wouldn't play Dungeons and Dragons otherwise. Every other time I've tried has been It's neither the setting nor the system is really my favorite.
Right. With role playing, with tabletop role playing, is there like a character? I don't want to say like character class because we're not really like focusing on D&D so much. Is there like a character archetype that you kind of like lean towards? Like, are you the loner character? Are you like the leader character? Are you the one who like everyone relies on? Like, what kinds of characters do you typically go for when you're playing role playing games?
I like social focused characters a lot of the time. So like Myra, Padme is another one of my current characters. We keep swinging back to that, but that is a fact. So I like that kind of character. Just because of who I am and my play style, I tend to go for more practical, sort of cautious, thinking things through type characters and like goal focused characters. Yeah, that tends to be my style.
That I always enjoy like asking that, whether it's like, oh, what's your favorite class for like D&D type stuff, or like the play style, because sometimes it varies. Like I get to know the person and then they swing wildly to something else in role playing because they can totally do whatever they want with the character.
Yeah, and like D&D is a different thing because like I don't think I've ever played a social focused character in D&D. Like I think I've played a fighter most of the times I played D&D, and now I'm playing a rogue because they're easier to play in D&D because I'm not very good at combat and spell casting and all of that.
Yeah, I've been playing D&D since like before 3rd edition, and I still like I'll play like a cleric-y type character to heal, but I don't play any magic users. It's too much. It's too much work to figure out like how many spells and okay, what spells am I going to learn? That's too much. I'm like, just give me something, let me whack it, or like pick locks or knock things over.
I think it does say something about like the classic Minna type that at one point in, or at least early in my RPG career, twice in 1 week I had characters in different games get knocked out in combat and carried out by the same person's character. Separate games.
That is wild.
They were good at talking and bad at fighting.
For the Star Wars game, do you prefer like one setting over another as far as like Star Wars time period?
Interesting. Well, I think with FFG, like the kind of out of the box period that you're doing is during the Empire, kind of before the rebellion really kicks off, I think. It's fun to play other periods though, just to like jump around and see what can happen. I'm not married to anything in particular. I've had a really fun one that was set during the Resistance era. That was fun.
Okay. I know I only asked because I know that they have like the different books, which I have all of them on my Amazon wish list.
I do have Rise of the Separatists.
Ooh, I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's sort of Clone Wars era.
Okay.
It has information about the Senate and about Naboo, so I think it also has
Of
the
course.
Padme stat block in it. So I was like, you know what? Even if I don't get to play with this, it's useful research for fanfic, I guess.
It's one of those things where I really want to play Star Wars again or get into Star Wars role playing. I'm a little bit intimidated about the dice because of how you have to interpret the results, but it intrigues me.
I actually really enjoy that about it a lot. It's something that I also like about Blades in the Dark, where you don't have like a straight success or failure. You have shades of it, where like you might snatch some advantage out of like a complete failure, and that's, or shading things with a consequence is always fun. Just straight success is not as fun.
Yeah, I like that concept of, well, you succeed, but, or
Yes.
you failed, but something else might have happened at the same time.
It definitely is a little bit. It's especially, I think, harder to interpret with Star Wars because there's so many different possible results, and you're not always going to use every single threat or advantage or whatever. But it's fun. I enjoy it.
Before we start talking about the podcast that you're involved in, which ties into my next question, how did you get into Blades in the Dark? Because I'd never heard of that system until talking to Ree for her podcast episode where we talked about Magpies and Blades in the Dark and role playing. How did you come across that?
Yeah, no, I also came across it because of Ree. This was pre the Magpies, though. Ree ran a one-shot of it. I think through the One-Shot Network Discord is how I encountered it. But she ran a one-shot of it for a couple of us, and I was like, I really love this game. This is really fascinating. I love the mechanics that are just like focusing on the action, and anyway, Ree is the reason I know Blades in the Dark, and then she put up the application for Magpies, and I was like, yes, I would like to play more.
After I had talked to Ree and then listened to the first Magpies episode, I bought Blades in the Dark immediately after. It's sitting in my drawer here next to me as one of those role-playing books where I've bought it, I've read through it, but at the moment it's just going to sit there.
Yeah. It's honestly, it might be my favorite role-playing game. It's just a lot of times I'll be playing other games and I'll be like, I wish this mechanic was just the Blades in the Dark mechanic for this. I have to deal with equipment? What? I just want the Blades in the Dark inventory. Or why can't we just do this Shades of Success thing that Blades does? Or I don't know. For some reason, it really works for me.
I think it's very friendly as far as just getting you into doing what you want to do, which is playing and creating and storytelling without having all that bulk to it at times.
Yeah. You don't have to plan out all this bookkeeping stuff because Blades doesn't want you to do that, and I don't want to do that either, so hey.
What do you mean? You don't want to have a particular person to record every single bit of treasure?
Yeah. I just honestly, anytime I'm having to do the equipment for character building on any game, I'm like, why do I have to do this though? I've seen the light. even Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars, I love that system. Boy, do I hate doing the equipment.
Oh my goodness. I feel you on that. There are too many things to write down for characters, and it's like, well, here's everything. Like, okay, you've given me 100 gold to spend. Let me see every single tiny item that I can buy. And oh, well, I might need this. We might come up against this. Better buy it.
I think in almost every Star Wars game I've been in, I've bought a rebreather and I've used it once. It's just that internal part of me that's like, but what if I emerged into the beginning of the Phantom Menace?
Right? Like I have the Wizards of the Coast Star Wars books that they did back in the like during that time period. And I remember that, okay, I need a comm link. And rebreather? Sure, you never know what could happen.
You never know.
I've played with people where it's like all of a sudden you find yourself, your ship is plummeting and you're in the water. Tell me how much encumbrance you have.
Oh my
It's like, oh gosh, like please no.
Yeah, I've always liked a more narrative approach to weaponry and equipment. Like, if it would make sense for you to have it, then you have it, is a totally fine thing for me.
Yeah, I like that. I like that it's not so focused on, I feel like a lot of people are shifting that way of narrative story. Let's just get in there and build and create versus like the listing of everything.
Yeah.
So you got into tabletop role playing games through the One Shot podcast. You got into Blades in the Dark thanks to running it, and then you applied and became a member of the Magpies Podcast.
I did.
What was that like? But I mean, you applied and you got accepted, and then what happened?
We just kind of gathered and started talking through like what we wanted the characters to be. I think that's what we did first. We built characters and kind of talked through that with Ree and each other. And I mean, none of us really knew each other beforehand except for players and Ree. So that was kind of interesting. I guess I knew Madge. Yeah, a little bit, at least. But yeah, we just kind of built characters first, and I think Ree did the starting situation on her own. Yeah, there was a period, like a good period there, where we just had some time to think about characters.
Okay.
I'm trying to think back. It's been a couple of years now.
back in the day.
Yeah, a whole like house ago. Early in my last house, actually. Oh my god. Okay, so the first episode the first recording we did, which the audio was completely unusable. We recorded two sessions before we recorded our first on-air session.
Mm-hmm.
It happened during, I think, Hurricane Irma. There were about 10 people at my house having a hurricane party.
Oh my goodness.
So that was happening. That was very loud. I was sitting on my floor, lots of laptop fan noise. So my recording was a nightmare.
What has been your experience doing an actual play podcast versus like is there a difference versus just playing for fun? Like what has the experience been for you?
For me, the biggest difference is that I think more than most of the other games I play, we kind of like plan things, if that makes sense. Like we think about story structure and how we want the season to look, and who's the big bad gonna be, what's our character arcs, and like to an extent, some of my games do that, but it's a lot more focused in Magpies, and I actually really enjoy that a lot. Like if I could play all my games like that, I totally would.
I definitely, like having listened to so many different actual play podcasts, I know that there are people that do have the general story, and then you kind of like fill in the blanks as you go, and you have to hit like those little, okay, here's where we need to go with this, and you guys are going, or everyone's going to get there, and we're going to do that, and then have like character development and do whatever the characters want. And then other times, like with Magpies, as you said, there is a lot more of that like planning or the like a structure to it, and making sure that like everyone's character has their focus or their time to shine and get them get them like involved in the story, so that way you don't hear just like, oh, this person's not really talking too much, or what's going on with this character. And
Yeah, and I think that's really a nice thing that Ree does. She checks in with us about, what do we want to happen with our characters, and how can we make that happen.
what's been the reception to the Magpies podcast after it came out, and you all have been doing it for such a time period now? How do you find yourself as far as like people listening or commenting?
I don't have a lot of comparison. Like, this is the first podcast I've done, but it's really neat to see people who are invested in the characters, because it's like, wow, other people care about my OC. I think that's what AP podcasting is. It's tricking people into caring about your OC.
I don't think I've ever heard anything like that as an answer before, but it's so true.
It is. And like, I'm always a fan of my RPG characters. Like, I'm the kind of person who does write fic about characters, and like, we've got so many fics in some groups that it's ridiculous, but it's just a different, it's really charming.
What is the future for the Magpies? I assume continue on until you all are done, or until there's a conclusion to the story, or
I don't really know if there's a public answer to that yet or not. I know that we've talked about it, but I'm not sure if there's an answer that we're giving out.
That's totally understandable.
If it's not in the Magpies Q&A, then we recorded the season 3 Q&A recently.
Cool. I'll have to. And we were talking before we started recording, and we both were lamenting like our lack of time to actually listen to anything. And I'm just like, I want to say, yeah, I'll be listening, and at the same time, I know like I don't want to lie about that, because I have zero time.
This was more for the audience. If it's not in the Magpies Q&A, then I don't know what to tell you.
Heck, by the time this episode comes out, with you and I talking, hopefully I'll have an answer on if the kids are going back to school or not, or if I'm going to have them home for like the next coming school year.
That's right. Yikes.
Yeah, it's been interesting.
What a topsy-turvy life we're living.
What's that?
What a topsy-turvy life we're living.
Oh, absolutely. Like the kids have been home since spring break, which was in mid-March. So we're recording this in June. I used to have like during the day they'd be at school, and so I'd have my like work from home free time where I'm working from home, but it's just me at the house. And now it's been like me plus all the kids at the house. I'm like, I have no free time. But I'd rather keep them safe than have them bring something home with them.
Yeah, for sure.
So as we were talking before we started recording, you like busted out with, I'm in other podcasts besides the Magpies, and I was like, what? So what other podcasts do you do, or is it just one other podcast?
Well, I'm in Ironhides, which has been on hiatus for a while now, but that happened for a while. And the one I'm in, that's a newer podcast, is the Compleat Discography, which is at @twinpod on Twitter. And we are reading all 40-something Discworld books in publication order together.
Are you reading them and recording them, or reading them and then talking about them?
Reading them and talking about them.
Okay, I was like
a book club review kind of situation.
Awesome. I'd heard of Discworld. I had never read anything until another Twitter person that I recorded with, Kelly, the Opera Geek, had recommended Discworld, and I was like, oh, like I'd never really read anything, so I read Guards.
Yeah.
And really, really enjoyed that. So there's definitely more books in the series that I need to read.
Yeah, the Vime stuff, the City Watch stuff is really fun. So I'm one of the people in the podcast who has read fewer books. Justin had read no books before coming to this podcast. I'd read like scattered ones, including like half the City Watch books and like half the Moist books, but I'm still relatively new to the fandom. Anna and Aaron have read all of them except for the final one multiple times. So it's a nice spread.
How did you get involved in this podcast undertaking with the book reading and everything?
So I don't know if you recall, but at the end of last year, a Good Omens adaptation came out on Amazon Prime.
Yes, and I have not been able to watch it, sadly.
So the four of us were in a group chat screaming about this adaptation because we were all either already into Good Omens, maybe. But anyway, we were all very excited about this series. So we were just yelling about it, and then we were like, as a meme, like, what if we just read all the Discworld books together? And then somebody was like, what if we just read them together as a podcast? And then it wasn't a meme. And it's real. And we're like 10 books in.
How has the podcast been as far as like you all reading and then coming together to discuss it?
It actually works like surprisingly well. We got a framework down within a couple episodes so that we like kind of keep on track with our discussion. And we'll always be like, I don't think we have that much to say on this book, and then we'll have so much to say on the book. It's ridiculous. So it works out well. We've instituted a shipping corner where Justin and I talk about things that we could have shipped during that book. It's great.
Do you have a favorite of the books that you've read so far that you'd be like, if you want to read a book, choose this one?
I would say either Mort or Guards. Those are probably both good entry points. I would not recommend starting on the first one in publication order unless you're me and you really want to see the development of a series over time.
That's what I had heard also, is that there's definitely different entry points to get into that are more friendlier than others.
Well, and it's like, I kind of approach it the way I would like a comic series or like Star Wars, frankly, where you just kind of jump in wherever interests you and just take a little chunk and go that way. And that's how I originally approached Discworld. Like, I started on Monstrous Regiment, which we're a long way off from reading, and then just did some City Watch books and did some Moist books.
That's awesome. I think that's one of the things that I really enjoy is reading a book and then getting to hear other people's opinion about the same book, but in like a good positive way, rather than like, I hated this book, it's awful, burn it. Like,
yeah, and like even the books that we don't enjoy that much, we like try and talk about at least in a largely Discworld positive manner, if that makes sense. Like, there's some books that we're just not huge fans of, but like we're trying to keep fairly positive.
I feel you on that. Like, I try to do like a book review series on this podcast, and it works sometimes, but then there are times where it's like, oh, well, we both didn't like the book. How are we going to do this?
Oh no, that's the worst. Book clubs can be really rough that way. Like, I definitely had an RL book club going for a while, and it just like some books I'd like be hate reading them by the end of it, and I'm like, I don't know how to talk about this with my friends who liked it and be nice about it.
Oh my gosh, that there was a book series that a friend had recommended, and she's like, okay, listen, the first book is good, the second book is not that good, but the last book is like absolute trash, but you're gonna have to read it just that way you can have like that conclusion. And I sure as heck hate read that one. Like, I can't believe I'm reading this and wasting my time just to see how the characters end.
Yeah, that's never a great way to read a book, but I've definitely done it.
Well, I would like to thank you, Minna, for coming on and talking about all of your cool stuff, especially Star Wars. And if I ever have a Padme episode, I know who to contact about having Padme, discussions. But for people that are listening to this podcast and they're like, oh, I want to follow Minna, or I want to go check out her podcast, what are the best places that they can do that?
So you can find me on Twitter at Minna Minnar, MynaMinnarr. The podcasts I'm in are Magpies Podcast, which is at magpies_pod on Twitter, and the Discography Podcast, which is at @atuin_pod on Twitter. That's about it. Any other links for me you can find on my Twitter pinned post, so.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to have the links to you and the podcast in the show notes and on the website and the Facebook page. So that way, if you are listening and want to check out any of those, just click on the link and you'll be taken to it. So that way you can do it really quick. And Minna, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to me about cool stuff.
Of course, it was fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.